Let's take a look at the language section of CMAT 2024 slot 2. As expected, this section was pretty easy, a few tricky questions, but on the whole, we should expect a pretty high score. Now, this question here is about phrasal verbs. It is asking you to pick the odd one out. The reason that these questions are interesting, at least to me, is that you have to figure out how one is different from the others. So yes, you do need to know the meaning, but you do have to also apply a little bit of reasoning. The first one here says go about. When you go about doing something, it means you start doing it or maybe you continue doing it, right? So you could go about your tasks, you could go about doing your homework, fairly common phrase. The next one is go after. Now remember that when I say that something is a phrasal verb or an idiom, it means we do not stick to the literal meaning. So when I say go after, yes, you could actually chase someone, that's literal, but it could also mean that you pursue something, you try to achieve it, like when you go after your goals. So again, when we say that something is an idiom, let's look at the figurative meaning. The third one, go fast. This does not have a figurative meaning. Go fast has only one meaning. It means to speed up, accelerate, and so on, right? So it's not an idiom. And the last one, go through. You could go through a difficult experience. It means to experience something or to have something happen to you. Now, amongst all of these, there is only one which is not an idiom at all, which is option 3, which is why that's your answer. Let's take a look at this vocabulary question. Now, the only thing you need to be careful about is that you read the instructions. Pick the word opposite in meaning to the word doleful. It's not a word we use very commonly, so I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, but today you will learn what it means. So, doleful normally means sad or sorrowful, okay? It could mean slightly sad, it could also mean grief-stricken. Now, what I wanted to tell you here is that this word root can actually help you remember a few more. So, just for the fun of it, I'm just going to write all of it down here. So, when we say dole or dolor, this normally means grief or sometimes pain. Okay. Now, out of this, we could create quite a few words. For example, I could say condolences. When you offer condolences to someone, you are sympathizing with them, you're sharing in their grief, right? Or when you say that someone is indolent, this means a person is lazy. They don't really want to take any pain. They don't want to make an effort. But the root word is pretty much the same. So please remember, dolo, dolor means pain. Now, after that interesting tidbit, let's take a look at our options. Cheerful, obviously we know it means to be happy, joyous. So this could possibly be an antonym. Deceitful, this word is very different. It talks about someone who's likely to cheat. So dishonest on the whole. Beautiful, we already know, so no point talking about that. And mournful, this means sad. And I'm sure you've heard of the word mourning. It means to mourn or be sad about some loss, right? So out of this, there's pretty much only one word that is the opposite of being unhappy, which is cheerful, and that is why it's your answer. Very easy question, but of course, it's doleful that you need to know. Otherwise also, let's say that if you don't know that word, right, I could still look at the options and say, okay, it will either be cheerful or beautiful because these words I kind of know. Deceitful and mournful, they both look like they are negative words. So maybe I'll pick one of the positive. So if you went about doing that, you may or may not have chanced at the right answer. So yes, I will agree it's a difficult word, but it's not something that's impossible to guess. Now here we have to pick the correct passive form of the sentence. Of course, we know how to convert from active to passive, but let's just quickly go over the rules for conversion. Now remember that in a sentence, there is a subject, there is a verb, and sometimes there is an object, right? I hope you remember how to identify the subject. The subject often is the doer of an action. Now, when you're converting from active to passive, one of the things that happens is that the subject, the doer, and the object, the receiver of the action, they interchange places. The subject often comes at the beginning of the sentence before the verb in active voice, right? Because the doer is actively performing the action. But when we change to passive, the subject or the doer moves to a place after the verb. So that is one thing you must do. There are a few more things you need to take care of. Don't change the tense. If it is simple present, then keep it simple present. Don't change to the past or the future. Then, sometimes you might want to use the preposition by to introduce the doer. For example, if I say, I kicked someone, I would probably turn to saying someone was kicked by me, right? So the doer is introduced by using by. But sometimes the doer is just not important. If I don't want to emphasize who is performing the action, I just want to talk about the action itself, then I can simply omit the doer, which is what the last bit talks about. So for example, someone saw him. Now someone is not important, so I can just say he was seen in passive voice. Let's take a look at this sentence now. He urged the council to reduce the rates. Now here I have a subject, which is he. I have a verb, which is urged. And what is the object? The council. So now what I really need to do is to get council before the verb and he probably after the verb, right? The first option says, he urged that the rates should reduce. First of all, it's an incorrect sentence. He urged that the rates should be reduced, right? Plus, it's not really interchanging the subject and object. So option 1 is wrong. The council urged to reduce the rates. Again, the council is not urging, he is urging. So this is changing the doer completely, can't be true. The council urges that the rate should be reduced. Now look at this. This is using the past tense, right? So I cannot change the tense. The fourth one, the council was urged to reduce the rates. Now, the receiver of the action, that is the council, has moved before the verb. The tense is exactly the same. The only thing missing is the doer. Now, it's okay to omit the doer in case you feel the doer is not important. But out of all these options, this is the only one that comes even remotely close to what we wanted. So option 4 becomes our answer. Now this is a fairly basic grammar question. We have to look at the underlined part and we need to pick amongst these options to ensure that the underlined part is correct. Do you know that dressing properly for an interview can earn you those brownie points which will help you get that dream job? Now, can is a modal. After modals, we typically use a verb in the base form. So if I want to use the base form of earns, it should be earn, right? So I should say can earn. But still, let's look at our option. If can earn was not in the options, then how do I pick it? Luckily it is. But we still have to look at why the other options are not really correct. Will earning. First of all, with will also, we typically use the base form. Will earn, will do, and so on. So we will not say will earning. We could have said will be earning, which is a completely different tense, but on the whole, this is just incorrect. Will earns, same problem, it should be will earn. The last one, earned. Now, why can't it be earned? Because we're talking about something that has not yet happened, right? We want to get the dream job. So we're talking about a possibility of getting that dream job. It's not an event that has taken place, so we should not use the past tense, which is why we go back to option 1 and say, okay, can earn is probably the best option. Now here we have an interesting grammar question based on usage. Of course, you do need to know some parts of speech because the options mention them, but these are parts of speech that we learn in school, so we should more or less be familiar. The sentence says, the students got puzzled solving the puzzle. Now we have to identify the usage of the word puzzle. The options are given to us, but before we look at the options, also we should kind of know what the answer is. In the first case, when we say the students got puzzled, we're basically saying they got confused, right? Solving the puzzle. Now, I'm sure that you have solved puzzles. It's some sort of a problem or a game that requires you to think. So, in the first case, we are trying to say that something happened to the students, right? If something happened to them, we need something approximating a verb. Now, what is a verb? What is a noun? What is an adjective? The details are right here. Noun is the name of a person, place, thing, or an idea. A verb typically is an action, but it could be a state of being. An adjective usually tells us more about a noun or a pronoun, and an adverb tells us more about a verb, adjective, or another adverb. Luckily, we don't have to worry about adverbs here. The first puzzled as I said, is something happening to the student. So I'm thinking most likely that it is a verb. The second puzzle for sure is a noun because we are talking about a thing. So the first option, adjective, is not going to work. Something happened to the students. They got puzzled. So not this. The second one, as a verb, this could work. But in the second case, the puzzle is not an adjective. So this is not correct. As a verb and as a verb, we know that the second puzzle is not a verb. So option 3 will not work. The fourth one, as a verb and as a noun, that's exactly what we wanted. So option 4 becomes our answer. And another thing I wanted to tell you, when we say got puzzled, do you know what form of the verb we're using here? We're using what we call the past participle. Now, I'm sure you've heard of what past participle is. So, in the present, we say puzzle. In the past, we say puzzled. And in the past participle also, we say puzzled. It is the third form of the verb typically. We might have to refer to it later, so just keep that in mind. Now, let's take a look at this really interesting question. We have to pick an answer for an office without pay. What is a one-word substitution for this expression? Our first word is salaried. Now, when you're salaried, you get paid, so it can't be that. Bonded could be when you're bonded to someone, you're obligated to work for them until certain terms and conditions are met. Typically, we have seen this word used in the context of bonded labor, and this was a form of exploitation in which some people borrowed money from someone who had that money and they could not repay their debts. So these people were forced to work without any payment until that debt was repaid. And the reason it was exploitative was that the debt just kept increasing and it almost never got repaid. So these people just had to keep working for free. Now, in today's day and age, also we have bonds. Certain companies do make you sign them, but yes, they do pay you. So bonded does not necessarily mean without pay. There might be some compensation that you might receive. That is why it cannot be bonded. Ex gratia, this is some payment that you receive not because your employer is obligated to pay you, but because they want to. They're happy with you as a gesture of goodwill. So you're getting paid, which means it is not this. Finally, we have honorary. Now, this sounds like a great word, but when they tell you that it's an honorary position, it basically means we're not going to give you any money. Yes, we will give you a lot of respect. You don't have to do much, but we will also not give you money. So the moment a position is honorary, it means you will not be receiving any compensation. That is why our answer is option 4, honorary. Now here we have to pick the correct option to complete the sentence. Very, very basic. The teacher never does something in the class. We're talking about some regular or habitual thing that is not done, right? For example, I could say that I always talk in class. It's something I do regularly. So whenever we talk about habitual actions, we use the simple present tense. Please keep this in mind. Will be helpful for other exams as well. Now, out of these, which is the simple present tense? Obviously, it should be sleeps. The teacher never sleeps in class. Obviously, shouldn't sleep in class also. Why can't it be 2? 2 is also simple present tense, but there will be a subject-verb mismatch. You see, with a singular subject, teacher, the verb should end with S. The teacher never sleeps. The teachers never sleep. So this is a plural verb. And this is a singular verb. And since my subject is singular, I should pick the singular verb. The third one is sleeping. This would suggest that the teacher is not sleeping right now, but maybe sleeping in class otherwise. So not 3. And the teacher has slept. See, when we combine has with a verb or a main verb, typically we would say has slept. So this is anyway incorrect. Our answer will have to be option 1. Now here we have a closed paragraph with 3 blanks. If you look at the instructions, it is telling us that we have to find the appropriate option for each blank. The first one, however, is asking for a replacement not for blank 1 but for blank number 2. So let's keep that in mind. We don't go in linear order. As you start reading this paragraph, it's honestly very difficult to understand, all right? So I would probably pause just before the first blank and ask myself, what are we talking about? What is the subject matter? This particular skepticism here means doubt. of the reach of reasoning. So people are doubtful about how far logic extends. That's what the subject matter is. Then we have our first blank, which is not a concern. Not yield, nor is it intended to yield any ground for not using reason to the extent that one can. Now this sentence I will interpret to say something like this. Yes, there are doubts about how logical we can be, but that doesn't mean we don't try to be as logical as we can. So that is my simplified version. After that, just before blank 2, we have a preposition and then we have the idea of justice. So what we have to understand is that when we're using a preposition, a lot of times a preposition will require a noun or something that acts like a noun. Why is that? Think of pretty much any preposition. If I say to, right? What can I add after to? I can say to me, to you, to him, to it. Now in these cases, I'm using pronouns, but I could also have named people and things. I could say to John, to Mary. So you generally need to put some sort of a noun. Now after to, yes, we do use verbs as well, to go, to do, but then we call those infinitives. So that is a completely different matter. After in, we could have said in my house, in your garden. So as you can see, we always have a noun. Now, the reason I'm using these examples is to prove to you that prepositions are often followed by nouns. So after in, I am going to look for something that resembles a noun. Let's take a look at our options. Pursue. Now, when I look at the options, initially they don't make any sense to me because I'm not even sure whether these are words. But as far as I can see, they are just misspelled. I believe what we really want to say is pursue or pursues. So when we use pursue or pursues, we're basically using a verb. It means to go after something, to chase something, like you could pursue an MBA or you could pursue your goals. But the E should be a U primarily. Now the first two options will not work because they're verbs, whereas I am looking for some sort of a noun to combine with a preposition. So options 1 and 2 are gone, right? Third one, pursuit. I'm going to read this as pursuit, which is also a noun. Normally, we would use pursuit with of. In pursuit of my goals. But there is no of here and there is no of there as well. So that means it cannot be option 3 either. Now, can I say pursuing? In pursuing the idea of justice? Maybe. Because pursuing is an action, but it is also what we call a gerund, which can serve as a noun. So it serves both purposes. I am performing an action, I'm chasing the idea of justice, but I'm also meeting that requirement of putting a noun after a preposition. So my answer is going to be option 4. We will read it as pursuing and not pursuing. Now here we have a closed paragraph with 3 blanks. This particular question is asking us to find a replacement for the first blank. So let's just read before the first blank. This particular skepticism of the reach of reasoning. We're talking about skepticism of the reach of reasoning. Skepticism is doubt. We are doubtful about how far reasoning or logic can extend, right? Now, if I understand this, can I fill in something into the first blank? Not necessarily, because this question is not so much dependent on comprehension as sentence structure. So let's take a look at the sentence structure. The subject of this sentence is the word skepticism, right? Skepticism is doubt and it is also a singular word. It's not skepticisms, it's skepticism or doubt. It's not doubts, it's one doubt, right? So the doubt or skepticism of reasoning. After that, I will need to put in a verb. Why? Because not yield does not make any sense, right? It requires a helping verb. So I will need to pick a helping verb that agrees with my singular subject skepticism. Let's take a look at our options. Does not yield. This makes sense. Does is a singular verb. It will align with my subject skepticism. So we keep the first one. Do not yield. On the whole, it makes sense. But I cannot say skepticism do because skepticism is one and do is a plural word. So not the second one. Now 3 and 4. Has and have will not really go with the word yield, because if I have to pick has and have, I would have to say has yielded or has not yielded, or basically either way I will need to convert yield to yielded. Now, has is singular, have is plural, but in both cases, since I have to change yield to yielded, neither of these options will work, which means that I will have to pick option 1, does. Please remember, this is a subject-verb agreement question. It's as simple as that. Now, let's take a look at this paragraph one more time, except that now our focus is going to be the third blank, because it says pick the appropriate replacement for 3, right? Before the third blank, we are saying there is no compulsion, as is sometimes blank. So we are talking about the fact that there is no compulsion, right? Compulsion is nothing but a noun. After that, we say as is sometimes blank. Now we are trying to say something about the compulsion itself. And before that, we already have the verb is. So after is, what can I put in order to describe compulsion? Can I say compulsion is assumes? That doesn't make any sense. I want something that can act as an adjective or some sort of a description, and assumes can only act as a verb. So this cannot be my answer. Same problem with option number 2, assume. It can only act as a verb, it cannot really describe compulsions. So 1 and 2 are out. Now can I say is sometimes assumed? Yes. Compulsion sometimes may be assumed. Why can it be assumed? Because assumed is the past participle of the verb, and participles can be used as descriptions. So we often say this is assumed to be true, and it's exactly the same concept we're applying here. So option 3 can work. As is sometimes assuming to eliminate. Now assuming is the present participle, but we cannot say compulsion is assuming because it is not currently doing anything. Is assuming will actually turn it into the present continuous tense, and we don't want to say that anything or anyone is doing something at the present moment. So option 4 is gone. Ultimately, we come back to option 3. That's the best one. Past participles, please remember, can be used as descriptions, and therefore it works. I've given you a few more examples here just to clarify that. From tire, we get tired. From cook, we get cooked. So for example, if I say that the food should be well cooked, just know next time that you're using a past participle. Now here we have to rearrange these parts into a meaningful sentence. Fairly easy. We also should remember that most of our sentences start off with the subject and they're followed by a verb. So if you want to do these questions quickly, look for the subject, follow it up with a verb, right? So let's do that now. In this case, I think the subject most likely is the Buddha, because this is someone who will probably do something. And what is the Buddha doing? Probably dissented against the orthodoxy. So I have my verb as well. So I should start with A, follow it up with C. Now look at the options. Where do I have A and C together? Option 2. So already I have my answer. But of course, we should always check it and ensure that the rest of it makes sense. So the Buddha dissented against the orthodoxy of his time and the Eightfold Path stood revealed. So it should be AC, BD, which is option 2, and therefore that becomes my answer. Pretty easy question. Now here we have a question type we all love, the parajumble. I was a little surprised that this parajumble did take a little bit more effort, because sometimes parajumbles are very, very simple in the CMAT. Now let's take a look at the first sentence. Yes, we do have options, but the options are not very helpful because B, A, C, D, all of them can be my starter, right? So I will have to do my starter-follower approach like we normally do with parajumbles. A definitely cannot be the starter because it starts out with however. So this is a contrast indicator. So not A, it's a follower. B, still the Indian child has been deprived of the gift. So when I say still and the gift, clearly a follower, I need to mention which is the gift. So not my starter. Now the moment I know A and B are not starters, I can cancel out at least 2 options. Now let's look at C and D. The power of education in transforming communities is a gift that has changed India in the last few decades. This could be a starter. It seems to be a pretty broad-based sentence. It could introduce the topic. And please note, we have a gift here and we have the gift here. So probably CB is a link that we can form. It is a gift that has changed India, but the girl child has been deprived of this gift. So we have our first link. Now look at D. India has seen a substantial increase in primary school enrollment due to the Right to Education Act 2009. So this is a positive development. However, Indian girls have not matched this rate of access. This rate of access refers to the increase in primary school enrollment. So we have our second link. D should be followed by A. So I know I need to now put C, B and DA together pretty much in one of these options. If you look at the options, it will have to be option 3. Again, not as easy as some parajumbles we have seen, but not too difficult either. Now in this question, we're given 2 statements. And if you look at the options, all that we have to really figure out is which of these statements are true and which are false, right? Not a very difficult task, except that it checks the usage of the word hardly. Now, I'm not really sure if you are familiar with how to use this word, but let's find out. Whenever you're in doubt, try to come up with sentences that you're familiar with so that you can either prove or disprove that statement. At least that's what I would normally do. Statement 1 says, hardly can be used to say that something is just true or possible. For example, imagine that you get some really good news. You have received an admit to the college of your dreams. What are you going to say? You can say, I can hardly believe it. What does that mean? It's almost impossible to believe, but it is true. So the first sentence is actually correct. He could hardly believe it means it was almost unbelievable or just about believable. So hardly can be used to say that something is just true. Now the second statement, hardly is a negative word and should not be used with not or other negatives. We can use hardly in this way as well. For example, I can hardly see anything. This means I can't really see much. So when I have used hardly as a negative, we know that in the English language, we avoid double negatives. Hardly is kind of like not. So we don't want another not in the sentence, which is why I cannot say I cannot hardly see anything, because that's equal to saying that I can see most things. So the second sentence is also true. Hardly can suggest that something is just about true or just about believable, but hardly could also be used like a not. So I need an option that says both of these statements are true, which means that option 1 is going to be my answer. Now here we have a pretty simple question in which we have to match the columns. All you need to do is to match the idioms with their meanings. And of course you can work with the options here as well. I would probably look at the most obvious ones. For example, in less than no time. In less than no time probably means that it's happened very, very quickly, right? So this could possibly mean in a moment. So I would say, B and 3 kind of go together. But that doesn't help because it's there in all the options. So I have to match something else. Once in a blue moon, very familiar idiom for most of us, it means something that happens very rarely. So once in a blue moon is going to be matched with 4. So I know that C has to be combined with 4. While our earlier endeavor was not very successful, here you can see that there's only one option in which C is matched with 4. So you don't actually have to solve the whole question. But still, fits and starts. Fits and starts normally means intermittently, sporadically. I study in fits and starts. That means I sometimes study, sometimes I forget, and then I start again, and then I forget again. So it means fits and starts is at intervals, not continuously. So A should be matched with 2, which also we have right here. So by this time, we can be pretty confident that we have our answer, but you should still know what all of these mean. On the dot means exactly on time. So if you say he arrived on the dot, it means he arrived exactly on time. So on the dot means at appropriate time. D has to be 1. So I know that my answer is definitely option 2. Very simple. Now here we could have a bit of a challenge, primarily because we are dealing with some Latin expressions here. And a lot of them have to do with legal terminology, although it's okay if you're not familiar with the law. I could probably guess a few as well. The first one, alma mater. This is very, very common, you see, because alma mater is nothing but the school or college we belong to. Now, literally, alma mater actually means nourishing mother. Not our mother, but the other mother who nourishes us, which is the educational institute, right? So, if you know that, then A has to be matched with 2. I think this is the easiest one to match. So if A has to be matched with 2, then I can cancel out option 1 and option 4 as well. The other thing that I would probably look at is de jure. Jure normally has to do with law. And if you have studied any foreign languages, then de normally means of. So something related to the law. B, therefore, probably is going to be the fourth one. Why am I saying probably? Because even if you're not very sure, this is a way to make an intelligent guess. But I think the most common one is ipso facto after alma mater. Ipso facto has the word fact in it. So clearly C has to be matched with 3. Now between 2 and 3, I know that my answer therefore has to be option 2. Very simple. Of course, the last one is probably the least familiar. When we say quantum meruit, honestly, I have not heard of this expression very commonly. So I know now that quantum meruit normally means that you are being paid for the work that you have done just because it's kind of fair, not necessarily because you have a contract to be paid. So you are being paid on the basis of the merit of the work that you have done. At least that's how I will try to remember this. So this was a new expression for me, but otherwise, ipso facto, de jure, alma mater, these should be fairly common. So now we can say our answer is option 2. Now here we have an assertion reason sort of a question. So let me just tell you what this question is all about. Of course, it is testing grammar, so we'll come to that in just a bit. See, an assertion is a claim that we make and reason is a supporting point, right? So when we assert that something is true, we have to prove it to be true. What you have to check first is whether the assertion and reason on their own are correct. After that, you have to check whether the reason in fact supports the assertion. But that's a secondary point of analysis. The first thing is just check whether both the points are valid, right? Now, if both the points are valid, then I can automatically cancel out options 3 and 4. Then I just have 2 options to worry about, which is why I'm saying, let's just do the fact checking. Now, the sentence here tells us, I wish it were possible. Is that correct? Does it sound right? To a lot of us, maybe it does. To others, it doesn't. Because it's talking about a pretty special area of English grammar called the subjunctive mood. If you are not familiar with it, then yes, I agree, it sounds very weird. Most of the times, if I say it, normally I would have said was, or I would have said is if I'm using the present tense. So why am I saying were? Because the subjunctive mood is normally used when we talk about something that is hypothetical, something which is contrary to fact. In other words, it's actually not going to happen. So this has a very special usage in the English language. Now, when you wish for things, why do we wish for them? Why don't we hope for them? We wish for them because we think that they're not likely to be true unless it's a miracle. So automatically, the word wish tells us that this is contrary to fact. I wish it were possible kind of says it's not. And that is why we are justified in using the subjunctive mood. Now, let's take a look at our assertion. Even though the above sentence lacks subject word concord is agreement, as per the English grammar, okay, it is a syntactically correct sentence. So when we say syntactically correct, it means on the whole, it accords or agrees with the requirements of English grammar, which it does, because the moment you slip into the subjunctive mood, the normal rules of subject-verb agreement are no longer applicable. Now, why is that true? It is syntactically correct because in the subjunctive mood affects the verb. Even singular subjects are followed by a plural verb. And yes, in fact, that is true as we have seen here. So let's take a look at the first assertion again. Whenever you're expressing a wish or whenever you are talking about something that is very unlikely to be true, we use the subjunctive. It could be the present subjunctive or the past subjunctive, and the syntax for both is slightly different. Now look at the reason. If I were you, I would take the job. Why am I saying this? I'm saying this because I'm not you. It's a statement contrary to fact. But I'm still using the word were because I'm using the past subjunctive. I'm using the past subjunctive because it's a hypothetical statement, and therefore I'm allowed to combine a plural verb with a singular subject, which is exactly what the reason is telling me. So the assertion is correct and the reason is also correct. The reason is further explaining the assertion and how subject and verb are supposed to be matched in the subjunctive mode, which means that it is definitely not 3, definitely not 4. And since we are sure that the reason in fact adequately supports the assertion, it will therefore not be option 2 either. It will have to be the first option. So I agree, the sentence is slightly tricky. If you're not familiar with subjunctive, you might have gone wrong with this one. Now here we have two statements again. No assertion and reason. We just need to check whether these statements are correct or not. And of course, it is testing a grammatical concept. The first statement says, very is used with adjectives, past participles used as adjectives, and adverbs. So we need to think of examples. Adjectives, very easy. When we say very happy, happy is an adjective, and we do say very happy. When we say very tired, tired here is a past participle, and we do say very tired. Very quickly, quickly is an adverb. How do we know it? The ly at the end helps us figure that out. So all of these are correct usages of the word very, which means statement 1 is definitely correct. Now statement 2 says, very is not used with past participles that have a passive meaning. What is a passive meaning? When something is already done or finished, that is passive. We're not interested in who has done it because it's already completed. Let's take a look at a few examples. We don't say very broken. Why do we not say it? Because broken is a past participle in the passive sense. Now, in case you're still wondering what is a past participle, it's the third form of the word, right? Break, broke, broken, right? So we don't say very broken. Similarly, built. Built means it's already done, right? So we don't say very built. We would say totally broken, completely built. We change the modifier. We don't use very. So statement 2 is also correct, which means that both statement 1 and 2 are true, which should be option 1. Now here we have a very simple vocabulary question. Simple if you know the word delineate. So the word delineate normally means to describe or draw in a lot of detail. When I say describe or draw, you could literally draw or you could describe in a lot of words. Okay? In both cases, you're trying to talk about something in a great deal of detail. The first word here, depict, has a similar meaning, to represent or portray something. So for example, I can say that this photograph depicts a particular event, right? It portrays it or shows it. So a could be a synonym. The second one here is not a word at all, disreputate. At least I don't know this word and I didn't find it in the dictionary. So I can be pretty sure it's not a word. The third one, describe. This is very similar to delineate because it could mean to describe in words. And the last option here, deprecate. See, deprecate means to make someone or something feel bad. So it could be to criticize, disapprove, or belittle. This is a negative word. It has nothing to do with the word delineate. So our answer here should be A and C. Both of them involve drawing or describing. So it's going to be option 2, A and C. Now here we have luckily a very short passage, but not very easy to read. So I'm going to try and highlight the main points in this passage for you as far as I can. It says, all the great religious teachers of mankind have insisted on this. What? Men ought not to live for themselves alone. So we should not live for ourselves. We should do something more. What is it that we should do more? We ought not to spend all our time and energy in getting just what we want. We ought to serve something greater. So over here, what we're trying to imply is that we need to serve a bigger cause than ourselves. Now this bigger cause could be God, it could be nation, it could be anything, but we have to look beyond ourselves. So in effect, I understand this to kind of say that, we should not just be self-focused, we should not be selfish. So this becomes one of my main points. After that, it tells us why. It will help us forget ourselves and achieve happiness. So this is the path to our own happiness. But after that, it says that this is also very difficult to do. It is also the hardest to learn and practice. In fact, most people have found it much too hard. So it's not very easy to be selfless. As you can see, not a very difficult passage. All great religious teachers and religions tell us, don't focus on yourself, do something larger, bigger for other people. Why? Because this will help you achieve happiness, but people find it difficult to do, right? So this is all I need to understand. Let's take a look at our questions. What does the passage suggest overall? We've just covered this, so let's just take a look at the same points. It says very clearly, don't focus only on yourself, serve something greater than yourself, right? Our first option says, it suggests humanism as a religious practice. You see, it's not really focusing on our need to be religious. It is also not necessarily talking about humanism. See, humanism is a philosophy that focuses on the human potential. But the passage is pretty clear. It is telling you, don't be obsessed with yourself, don't be selfish, try to do something for other people. So, it's not humanism, first of all, and it is not suggesting that we need to be religious, although we could be. That could be one way to be selfless. So, A is not our answer. It holds nationalism as the most cherished sentiment. See, nationalism is when you have a lot of pride in your nation and you prioritize the nation above all else. But again, nation could just be one of the causes that we work for, just like God. It's not the only thing. So let's keep our focus on the idea that we need to work on a larger cause. The passage does not specify what this larger cause is. So maybe not B. It holds altruism as a universal value. What is altruism? Being selfless, doing good deeds, and that's exactly what it's saying. Do something greater than yourself. It could be a god, it could be a cause, it could just be other humans. So it could be humanism, it could be religion, it could be nationalism. But all of it together counts as altruism, selfless service. So C, I would say, seems to make sense. It holds humanism as the most important thing. It doesn't hold humanism as the most important thing because of reasons already discussed. It could be other people we work for, but it doesn't have to be. So maybe not this. Now, E says it puts altruism in the binary of selfishness. When it says binary of, it means it is contrasting altruism with selfishness, which is exactly what it is doing. We ought not to spend all our time and energies in getting what we want. We ought to do something greater than ourselves. So these are two different ways of existing. So yes, there is a binary opposition being created. So far, I would say C is okay, E is okay, A and B we have anyway rejected, right? Now let's look at our options. Is there an option with C and E? Yes. Option 4. So we have our answer. Slightly tricky this passage. I understand that you may have gone wrong if you did not understand all these words. But if you did understand these words, then both the RC questions are easy. Let's take a look at this one now. Which of the following terms is closer to the central idea of the given passage? We already know the main points, right? It talks about how people should serve something larger than themselves, greater purpose, practicing selflessness. So you can see the theme emerging, right? Do good for other people, be selfless. We just need a word that kind of covers all these ideas. So the first word, nationalism. This generally is a sense of pride and loyalty towards your nation. The author does agree that this could be one of the causes, but the author does not insist on it. So nationalism does not cover the larger purpose all the time. It is just one of the larger purposes. 2 says materialism. This, in fact, the author is opposed to in a way, because the author is saying don't just try to keep getting things for yourself. So materialism is kind of the belief that physical wealth or possessions is the purpose of life. And the author is trying to actually steer us away from that path. So definitely not option 2. Humanism generally is a philosophy that we need to enhance our own potential. So humanism believes in humanity as a good thing. And yes, the author does say that you can devote yourself to other fellow humans, but again, it's just one of the larger causes. It's not the only one. So finally, we come to altruism, which is a selfless concern for the welfare of others. It could be a nation, it could be your people, it could be God, it could be a cause, anything, as long as you're doing good deeds. And that is what the author is trying to emphasize. So our answer is going to be option 4.